For any operator who is serious about building a business, I think that building a brand is no longer optional.
Here's a link to book direct next time. Is that something that hosts should not be doing within Airbnb?
If there's one thing to be said about our industry, is that hospitality, both from a field operations perspective and beyond, is...
What do Airbnb's policy changes mean for hosts? Are you still able to share links? Can you encourage your guests to book direct next time, or will that get you banned? Perhaps if you're only listed on Airbnb, now's the time to diversify your business and double down on other OTAs and direct booking. Simon Seroussi from SuiteOp is the special guest on today's House Planet podcast, and he has answers for all of these important questions. Simon, thank you so much for joining us on the House Planet podcast. Airbnb just introduced some big policy updates. What are the major changes that hosts need to know?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, James. Excited to be here. So there's quite a few things that Airbnb has announced, or in some cases reiterate. I think that's one thing that's quite important about those policy changes. Is that some of these were actually always present in one way or another. But I think what Airbnb is doing here is pushing a bit harder on them and at times clarifying the language to ensure that there is less uncertainty as to how to be compliant with the platform. I think what makes this a bit tricky is that Airbnb announced those policy changes in an email about, in mid-April 2025, with the target date of enforcement of May 10th. And in between that time, I think a lot of hosts and operators have asked questions, what is the best place to go find things? So there are two main first articles that I think I'd invite everybody to check out because it is technically split into two Airbnb help articles, one around off-platform fees and another one around links, secure deposits, and off-platform behavior in general. One of them is a bit shorter than the other, but I think they complement each other quite nicely. So in terms of what was said there, so the first thing I think worth noting is there's something about fees there. The second big component I think is about links. So the first portion about fees is that Airbnb is making a clear distinction as to what is a mandatory fee and an optional fee. Mandatory fees are typically going to be things that have to be booked for the stay to occur in the first place. That could be additional taxes. That could be a pet fee, right? Or if you have a pet fee and a guest is coming with a pet, it is mandatory to pay it. Those fees, Airbnb is effectively clearly stating have to be completed whenever possible at booking. Now, I'm stating whenever possible here because there are exceptions to this. For example, if you're in a region where you may collect specific city taxes that Airbnb doesn't support out of the block, you have the ability and the right to collect those outside of the platform. There are also potentially other exceptions, though Airbnb, again, isn't stating these very clearly in the terms and conditions. So I would probably inquire with Airbnb directly if you have a particular mandatory fee that concerns you. And then there are going to be optional fees. So optional fees are going to be things that a guest can typically add on to a reservation to improve it, whether it's an early check-in, a late checkout, pool heating, or other types of services. And what's interesting here is how Airbnb makes a distinction between hosts and hotels. And I think they're using the word hosts versus property managers in intentional ways as well. And for some, it may blur the lines a bit because some property managers at a certain scale tend to operate a bit closer to how a hotel operate than how a traditional 1 or 2 unit hosts may do business. And so for those optional fees, Airbnb is saying two things. The first one is that they should be disclosed inside the listing very clearly. So if you have an early check-in available, it shouldn't be something that comes as a surprise after a guest requests it in a message. It should be, what is the early check-in price and what are the options to be able to request it? The second thing that Airbnb states is that those optional fees need to be actually collected inside the platform. So you can no longer send a Stripe link or an invoice to your guest to collect an early check-in including in the event of being a software connected host. The software connected host portion applies specifically to security deposits in some locations in which Airbnb still allows and is lenient with collecting security deposits outside of the platform. But they are pretty clear that things like early check-in and others should be done through the resolution center. Now, this obviously brings a lot of complications that I'm sure we'll be chatting through. Now, Airbnb makes an interesting distinction here by mentioning hotels. And they're saying that for hotels, some optional fees that are collected in the course of normal business practice, which is, again, a hard term to define, like parking, can be collected outside of the platform. I think the point Airbnb is trying to make 2 points here. The first one is that hotels, which I think to some extent includes some professional operators as well, may sometimes have to abide by other rules merely by the partners that they may operate with. A third-party parking that potentially lives on site may have to collect payments through their own payment processing, and it may be really challenging to get that done through the resolution center. Airbnb still wants the guests to have a good stay and operators to be able to operate. So I think that's why they're making these interesting distinctions there. But I think the takeaway here should be that whenever possible, all fees should be, one, disclosed prior to booking, ideally as part of the fees themselves that a guest can add, like a pet fee, for example, in booking, or at the very least in the listing description itself. And then the second thing is, when possible, collect those fees through the resolution center as opposed to through a third-party platform. So I think that sort of summarizes a little bit what Airbnb is doing around fees and the sort of additional control that they're putting there. The second, I think, big portion is around links. What's really crucial about the link sharing policy is that Airbnb actually states pretty clearly a couple of exceptions there right at the bottom, conveniently, of the policy article itself. And there's, I think, two big ones here that are worth noting. The first one is any concierge platform that aims to improve the guest's stay is still very much authorized. So that includes, guest portals, guidebooks, and other types of platforms of the sort. The second thing is links that enable a guest to access specific parts of the property or benefit from specific amenities, like controlling Sonos speakers or unlocking a door. But what Airbnb is stating here, and that's when things can get a little hairy, is that a host or an operator cannot require a guest to be able to check in using one of those concierge apps. So, in other words, Airbnb is saying you can share links, but they have to be bring an additional value to the Airbnb experience of a guest, not be essential to it. I think that, all this means at the end of the day for softwares like these, amongst which SuiteOp is to ensure that they are flexible enough to work with various platforms through their inner workings and through workflows that they've put in place.
Let's break down a couple of things then. We've got mainly fees and links. When it comes to the fees, are Airbnb just saying we want our cut of anything extra? And with the links, is it very basically don't be sharing direct booking channels with guests because we want to keep everybody in Airbnb?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, on the first point around fees, it remains unclear what the exact strategic financial goal of Airbnb is, if there is one. I think that at the end of the day, Airbnb is really doing this from positive intent. Those policy changes here, I think the main goal is ensuring that the guest experience is frictionless, that for the likely majority of guests that are booking with individual hosts or smaller hosts, that they can stay on platform and they're not being ping-ponged around to different softwares. But I do obviously believe that there is also a certain position of control. And being able to control the experience isn't just to make it frictionless, it's also to be able to control the flow of funds, know how much is being spent by the guests. Airbnb obviously has relaunched Airbnb experiences too. And so I think they're very much intended to be part of the Airbnb stay. You book a stay with Airbnb, you then book experiences through Airbnb experiences and not through a third-party experience provider, whether that is a host, a partner of the host, or something else entirely like Vider, for example. So I think there's definitely a component there of wanting to control the fee. Now, whether or not that means Airbnb will take a cut remains to be seen. So far, any resolution center fees have not been subject to any fees. However, one thing is certain is that any fee taken at booking are subject typically to the Airbnb commission. So it remains to be seen how far they take it for fees themselves.
Yeah, I mean, with the resolution center there, if somebody wants to stay another night and you request some extra money, you can then potentially just block your calendar, take the extra money, and Airbnb might not know that they're staying an extra night, but they're just paying the extra for it. And obviously that amount of money is not subject to commission. So I imagine this is what Airbnb want to stop, and they'd rather that anything extra is included right at the start so they get their cut. And then I just want to go back to the direct booking angle as well, because there are hosts and property managers out there. Whenever they get a guest from an OTA like Airbnb or Booking.com, their goal is to turn that guest into a repeat booker who books direct next time. So if after a guest stays, you then contact them and say, hey, great to host you, here's a link to book direct next time, is that something that hosts should not be doing within Airbnb?
I definitely think that hosts need to be more careful with Airbnb guests in terms of the language that they now share. Ultimately, the link policy, I think you said it very correctly here, is about not necessarily damaging the ability for any operators to conduct their own business and have their own direct booking strategy, but rather to not either forcefully convert or highly incentivize in financial methods like discounts and such guests to book off platform once Airbnb has brought that guest. I think that ultimately hosts have long seen Airbnb and other OTAs as a bit of an acquisition tool that then enables them to build their brand. With these new policies, and specifically with Airbnb, I think there's a couple of things that property managers need to do. One, never try to circumvent Airbnb for existing bookings, especially for inquiries. I've seen folks in the past, using hidden messages in inquiries. Obviously, links and other things at the inquiry stage are typically completely blacked out by Airbnb, but have been able to find ways to encourage a guest to book off platform. That's a behavior that I would obviously highly discourage in the first place. It's always been something Airbnb frowns upon heavily. But in terms of extending guests, I think unless the guests of their own volition, I think that's an important component that we can touch on, goes and decides to go on your website and books direct for an extension, that you should, when possible, extend that guest on Airbnb itself, and that Airbnb will clearly frown upon clear calls to extend the booking off platform. I think at the end of the day, you don't want to ask guests here, book direct for a discount. What you want to do is, one, ensure that you're using first vetted software that either is connected to Airbnb or connects to a software that is. And ideally, also, work with softwares in general that do not charge transaction fees. Because typically these softwares, is going to be in their interest to take a guest off platform and to have the transaction happen on their software, because that's what their business model relies on. So I think that Airbnb is sort of pushing against these as well. I think at the end of the day, a big reason behind Airbnb's move as well is a clear jab at some larger short-term rental brand that immediately bring a guest to a downloadable app or a completely different experience outside of the platform. Brands like Sonder have been known to do this in the past, and I think Airbnb is clearly trying to put a halt to that. So hosts have to think about their direct booking strategy, not simply as a way to offer a discount to guests and encourage them that way, but rather as a way to, how can, as an operator, ensure that my brand speaks for itself, so that guests are of their own volition encouraged to book direct. I think that having that term, the brand speaks for itself, really comes to a light here, literally, because you cannot explicitly have tell a guest and speak to a guest and tell them to book with your brand directly. So I think it's just rethinking a little bit how your direct booking strategy works today.
Yeah, be careful with what you're sharing in the Airbnb app and on the messaging. Of course, take extra care, especially with the links that you're sharing. HostHub is a top-rated property management platform for short-term rentals. HostHub can help you increase revenue, improve operations, and ultimately save you time and money. HostHub has everything you need to manage your properties effortlessly and reliably. It will sync rates and availability across all the channels where your properties are listed, and it includes tools like automated messaging, team management, and expenses. It also includes smart pricing integration, task and cleaning management, and automated door locks. HostHub provides a zero double booking guarantee, 24/7 support with an average response time below 3 minutes, and a fresh and friendly interface that is easy to learn and use. And right now, HostHub is offering a 14-day free trial to any host or property manager who would like to try the platform. Head to hosthub.com/HCH for further details. I mean, we've touched on this a little bit, Simon, but what does this new policy say about Airbnb's future direction?
Yeah, I mean, I think it does hail some positive change in terms of how they're continuously, I think, investing on the platform in order to ensure that hosts have more features enabling to collect things like pet fees. Airbnb 5, 6, 7 years ago didn't have any of that. It was, at the very beginning, the resolution center was even more bare bones than it is today, and that was really your only way of collecting those types of fees. So Airbnb has made, I think, significant investments there. But on the other hand, it could spell, I think, a similar approach to how more traditional OTAs are tackling things. I think for the majority of OTAs like Booking.com and Expedia, any payments made online prior to arriving to a hotel is going to be subject to that OTA's commission. If you're booking a room with a breakfast option, where the rate, instead of it being $200 a night, is $250, the OTA will take a full commission, not on the $200, but on the $250 itself. So it could potentially predict this type of behavior from Airbnb and other, I think, host-friendly OTAs like Vrbo. Or it could simply be an attempt to make the guest experience frictionless. I think that at this stage, where the only thing we can do is wait, and in the meantime, ensure that we're as compliant as can be.
Yeah, and with direct booking, maybe it becomes kind of a little bit simpler. Don't do things within the Airbnb app, but have a QR code in your listing which people can actually scan, or give people a call. Give your guests a call if you've got their number and ask them how they are. I know it's not the modern way to pick up the phone and give people a call, but it might help with your guests and getting more direct bookings. Another thing to mention in relation to this, Simon, is does this kind of stress the importance for hosts out there who are only on Airbnb, that they need to potentially diversify a bit to go on other OTAs like Vrbo or Booking.com, and also develop their own direct booking strategy if they don't have one already? Because if you do fall foul of these rules, Airbnb might be quick to get rid of your listing.
Yeah, so I think it's first, I think, crucial to separate a little bit different kinds of hosts, right? I think for a smaller host who is hosting on Airbnb with a couple of homes, whether they're owner operators and they own those homes, or they manage a couple of homes for friends and family and maybe a couple of other folks. I think that in this situation, reliance on OTAs is absolutely fine, because at the end of the day, OTA reliance also means less work in having to manage the flow of direct bookings, the communication outside of the platform, handling payments via Stripe or another payment processor, and all the complications that come there. So I think that it's still perfectly okay for these types of hosts to rely on OTAs for most of their of their revenue. However, for any operator who is serious about building a business, building a brand, but building a business first and foremost, I think that building a brand is no longer optional. It used to be that you could really put heads into beds, where you could have a home, furnish it, as long as it's clean and decent, folks would book. Today, one, competition is highly intensified on OTAs themselves. I think we've all witnessed this over the last couple of years, but I think more so, hosts and operators, I think it's now inevitable. If they want to build a brand, they have to diversify. I think they have to do it for two reasons. I mean, there's a key man risk there where having a good chunk of your revenue come from one platform is always risky. Anything could happen. The platform, there could be financial downturn for said OTA, which is unlikely, but more likely a guest could complain about something and you could be soft banned or hard banned for a certain number of days, which could impact your business significantly. But then there's also obviously more practical things that we all know about, which is OTAs take significant fees. And I think investing a good chunk of the fees you would be paying in building a better brand, in doing some direct marketing, some better SEO, some better website building, and building that guest experience that is going to speak for itself and encourage guests to book again with you, is going to pay off. I think hosts are often hesitant to do this because of the work that it involves, but I think that it's no longer an option. And investing in that brand, whether it's with a QR code in the unit that enables guests to be able to find you easily, whether it's sharing your website not in a way to encourage guests to book with you, but simply as a way for guests to discover your brand and what you're about. Having a clear voice when you communicate with those guests, and not highly pre-made messages that are written by AI. And then occasionally picking up the phone with those high value guests. I think all of those things are really important. And if there's one thing to be said about our industry, is that hospitality, both from a field operations perspective and beyond, is going to remain a highly human-centered industry, and that's something to be taken advantage of. Not something to shy away from. I think automation is fantastic, but it also has its limits, and we need to be aware of these.
Yeah, we need to retain the human touch. I think that is really, really important. All right, then we've done plenty there on Airbnb. You've mentioned your company a few times, SuiteOp. So tell us about it and tell us the story of your business.
Yeah, so I think the SuiteOp journey started almost more than a decade ago. I was in my early 20s living in a 190 square foot studio in the East Village of New York, which sounds more romantic than it is. And whenever I visited family back home, I'm originally French, so I would travel home at least once or twice a year. I did some quick math and was realizing that I was paying, basically $70 a night for my apartment to sit empty. And that's when I discovered, I think Airbnb. Airbnb was still a pretty new company in 2013. 2012, 2013, I think about $50 to $6 million of revenue back then, which is, still a lot looking back, but nothing compared to today. And obviously most saw it as a cool way to travel like a local, which I think was true. For me, I also saw it as a way to make real estate more efficient, especially when you realize that in the United States, almost 10% of homes just sit empty. And that sort of seemed crazy to me, at my scale of leaving my apartment empty for an entire week. So it led me to an interesting path. I became a pretty early host in New York, prior to any of the complex zoning regulations and other regulations hit the city. I eventually joined a company called TravelClick that built software for hotels, where I actually built back in 2015-16 direct booking software for hotels, as I think hotels were going through what property managers in the vacation and short-term rental space are going through now, which is a big direct booking renaissance. And really the turning point, it was when my co-founder and I, Jean-Manuel and myself, in 2018 launched SoSuite, our own short-term rental brand in Philadelphia. And we decided to take a different approach really from the get-go here. We brought everything in-house. We had intentions to scale, but we also had intentions to understand the business in and out. So housekeeping, maintenance, guest experience, truly everything, even bookkeeping and accounting. But when we started getting to about 100 to 150 properties, we really started hitting a wall. The wall was that at the end of the day, we just spoke about it, that this is a human-centered industry, and human capital is very hard to scale. Every time your team grows, you're not just adding human beings to the mix, you're also adding complexity to your operation. Given our technology background at this stage, Jean-Emmanuel is an engineer and a mathematician, and I've worked in product and hotels for a while. We decided that there was a better way for teams to work smarter together. So the first thing we did was look outward and tried every single tech solution that we could find. There are great tools out there, but we often kept running into the same issue. Best-in-class solutions would connect to our PMS, but they wouldn't necessarily talk to each other. So while our PMS did a great job at handling bookings, pushing us on many channels, handling some of our bookkeeping and accounting, we still needed separate tools to properly screen guests at scale, manage guest communications, utilizing smart devices, tracking maintenance and housekeeping tasks. It quickly became a bit of a Jenga tower. It was quite unstable, painful for our staff to use as well. And I think it also created a bit of a discombobulated guest experience, where guests were, experiencing exactly what Airbnb is fighting against now, which is ping pong between different things throughout their stay, from different booking platforms to pre-check-in and et cetera. So that's when it hit us that we could make all those systems work together by building a more unified guest operations tool, and that's when SuiteOp was born. It enabled us to almost double the business then. It's grown since then into something much bigger. So we really ended up building what we wish we had as operators and technologists, which is a guest operations platform that can handle everything that happens once a guest has booked. So that ranges from a beautiful branded guest portal with everything that they need at their fingertips, and the ability for them to make additional requests, process upsells as well, and other optional fees. A guest screening process, but one that is a bit unique and that makes guests feel welcome instead of necessarily interrogated. A smart device management that helps you ensure that your device never become a headache. Because I think that's something that's always interesting, is that this industry tries to be contactless and efficient, but the more devices you add, the harder it is to take care of these, and they can quickly become a liability. So ensuring that you can stay on top of it easily and have obviously the automations that those devices can provide. And then finally, a task management to tie it all together, so that nobody's really left wondering what's happening and what needs to be done. When a device goes out of battery, a task gets created. When a guest checks out, a task gets created for the right person as well, and the right folks get notified along the way. I think in general, like, this industry can be very stressful. Whether it's answering late guests' calls at night, handling hundreds of 4 p.m. check-ins depending on your size and scale, we really wanted for daily check-ins and check-outs to be the easiest part of your day, not a moment that an operator dreads, and ensuring that your operation could really run like clockwork. So that's how SuiteOp came to be.
Fantastic. So who is SuiteOp really for? What's your ideal customer? Who are the people in our audience that should really be taking a look at what you're offering?
So I think it's folks that are, one, looking to potentially consolidate existing tools, and that are having a hard time balancing all of these different softwares day in, day out. I think the second types of customers are going to be folks that take automation and their business seriously. If, again, this is sort of a hobby and they have one home, SuiteOp may not be the best fit for them. Although we do have some hosts with one or two homes, but they're highly branded. They still take it extremely seriously. They have 20, 30, 40% direct bookings, even with two homes in destinations that may not sometimes lead to a lot of returning guests. So I think that size isn't so much of a factor, though the product is built for scale. So the average operator using SuiteOp has about 100 properties under management typically, or ownership. But it really ranges from 1 to 1,000. And that's really, I think, what the beauty of the tool is it just helps you run your business better.
How much does the solution cost? I imagine it'll depend on the number of properties, but kind of like ballpark figures, I guess.
Yeah, so in pounds, it costs. It depends. So it's a very modular product. I think it's worth saying that. So we really want operators to only invest in the modules that they need. If you don't have smart locks, then you don't need to pay for that. Similarly, if you don't need to do any guest screening because of the location you're in or the segment that you're in, that's something that you can also exclude. So depending on your size, it's going to range anywhere from £7 or £8 to 15 to 18 pounds per property per month. And with SuiteOp, we really want to ensure that the product is going to have an ROI for you. The ROI should come in two ways. There should be an immediate financial visible ROI where you're able to sell more add-ons to your stay and other features that are going to generate anywhere from 30 to 70 pounds per property per month in additional revenue. And then the second portion should be time saving. You should save hours for every property that you have. And I think the third one is brand building. And that one is a bit more intangible, but having an experience that is digital, but still highly personalized, reflects your brand's look and feel end to end, and allows you to capture guest sentiment from booking all the way to checkout and be aware of changes so that you can take action and maintain the quality of your brand, I think has a massive and growing impact and importance for hosts and operators today. And SuiteOp is set on helping those independent operators being able to offer the same experience than a massive hospitality brand has been able to offer for some time now.
Sounds like a great solution. Speculate to accumulate people. Simon, tell us the website address. Where can people find out more information?
Yeah, so to find out more, head to SuiteOp.com. We do no strings attached demos and trials as well. Happy to chat as well and talk shop. This is an industry I'm really passionate about. So if you want to just talk operations and have a quick demo, we can do that too.
Superb, and we'll put all these links in the show notes so you can easily find Simon and SuiteOp. Search and Stay is the holiday rental platform made for property owners. The Australia-based online travel agency prides itself on being owner-friendly and guest-focused. Hosts and property managers who use Search and Stay can list, book and manage properties for free, with the site only charging a minimal, affordable rate for each confirmed reservation. Search and Stay is committed to being the most affordable holiday rental booking platform for both hosts and guests. Head to the website for further details, searchandstay.com. Just before we get to our questions to finish, what trends are you seeing in the industry this year that hosts and property managers need to be aware of? Yeah,
so I think what's really there's a couple of things that are happening in 2025. I think the first one is regulation. It's been always a top of mind topic for folks, but I think that governments are now moving faster than they were in the past, sometimes detrimentally, because laws are being pushed without a clear measure of the success of how it's actually working, and like a retrospective after a year or two of how it actually has worked. But I think that it's really crucial for anyone who takes this as a business and seriously, to be aware of zoning regulations when they enter a new market, permit regulations, taxes and fees as well. All of those things ultimately are going to impact your bottom line in one way or another, whether it's through additional fees or whether it's through legal fees or expediting fees. And I think that this speaks to a broader trend of operational efficiency. it's so important for operators moving forward to take operations really seriously. This isn't just about squeezing every dollar out of every guest by optimizing your price, which is really crucial and still something that one needs to pay attention to. It's about ensuring that your operation runs efficiently, that you don't have any leaking costs. And so I think there's an interesting trend emerging there from a software perspective too, which is that one of the most incredible thing about this industry is how open vacation rental and short-term rental operators are to software. I think that that's a very big distinction to the independent hotel industry, where structurally there's a bit more red tape. And we're now noticing, I think, folks that are saying, okay, well, I have all these softwares now. I'd like to consolidate. I'd like to take a step back and look at my stack and make sure that everything actually has a return on investment for me. Things that are nice to haves can be cut off, and things that are must have or have a clear ROI can be kept. So I think there's a more methodical approach that we're noticing. And I think that it's largely tied to the need for efficiency and operational excellence.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think there's a lot of property managers out there that would like to reduce their tech stack a bit. They're wondering all these monthly fees, where's all this money going? Am I getting an ROI? And then on the regulation, yeah, definitely. I mean, we've been asking the UK government for a long time, get the data first, find out, how many properties they are and the impact that they're having before implementing policy. But yeah, we've been speaking into a barren tunnel about that for a long time. All right then, Simon. So we've got a few questions to finish. Your favorite brand in the STR industry and why, apart from SuiteOp, of course?
It's very hard to name just one, but actually, I'm a really big fan of what Red Cottage is doing. They're a New York-based brand. They have a pretty big presence in upstate New York, with a large focus on really beautiful vacation homes. And actually, interestingly enough, after some LinkedIn ping ponging, I had the opportunity to meet the founder, Matthew Orley, for coffee a few weeks ago. And I think what's really special about them is that they've been able to marry the independent operator mindset that truly makes every guest feel cared for, feel attended to, as if you were a host with one home, almost welcoming the guest in person. Obviously, they're not able to do that at their scale, but they've been able to marry this with scalability, and with an operations that scales, a business that is profitable, and I think that is in many ways a fairly recession resistant. They also have an annual membership program, which I think is one of its first kind in our industry, where guests can pay an annual fee to be able to access member-only benefits, discounts as well, and I think that works really well for them because they are a weekend destination for folks, especially in the Northeast. So I think what this speaks to is, like, as an operator, as a property manager, think about the type of guests that are staying with you. Are there guests that are coming for the weekend for the most part, or do you have mostly guests coming for work? Try and find your segments and try and come up with interesting strategies that are going to work for these types of guests. I think David nailed that, and I'm just quite impressed about what they've been building over the last few years.
Superb. Great shout out there for Red Cottage. An individual in the STR space you'd like to give a shout out to, and why?
Yeah, it's also hard to just name one. We've had so many incredible advocates and folks in the last few years. But one person, and really it's a team, but that I've been quite impressed with recently, it has been the Rentjoy team. It's a property manager based in the US, and Colorado Springs area, and specifically, and I've had a chance of meeting Michael and Reed and a few members of their team, and I think their relentless pursuit of data integrity has been really impressive. They built their own internal tool, built in part like Airtable and other things, in order to not only track performance data, in micro ways, understanding how each of their team members is performing to be able to provide the right level of training or coaching needed and fill the gaps, all the way to understanding how each stay is doing. And they've done so for their own sake, but also to offer more transparency to owners. So they're sort of building better owner reporting and better KPI sharing with owners to ensure that it offers a more self-serve experience for them. So I think, I'm quite impressed by what the team's been doing, and excited to follow along their growth.
Superb. Finally, then, your number one lesson learned since founding SuiteOp.
I think that's a great question. So many lessons when I think you create a company, and I think the one I would stick with the most is to try and stay focused. It's extremely distracted when you create a company, including a property management company, to be distracted by the markets and macroeconomic conditions and be worried by that. If you're, a digital product person and junkie like me, it's really hard also to store away from one's desire to build many features that you feel are needed in the industry. Because when, as an ex-property manager, it was also really hard to choose what ancillary services or cool, unique things we could offer a guest to differentiate ourselves. And I think the third really easy thing to get distracted with is what the competition is doing. In general, it's a space that has a lot of new emerging players, and so it's easy to think, wow, they're doing this, maybe we should do it too. I'm not trying to say stay in your lane, but in some ways, keeping your head down, being aware of all those things that are happening here. It's not just about playing the ostrich and putting your hand under the sand here, but truly picking a couple of important KPIs for you to do, picking a couple of initiatives for you to hit on any given quarter or whatever timeline you're working to, and sticking to them with a level of flexibility in the event that a unique opportunity occurs or comes up along the way. Would be really my number one lesson, and one that would have saved me a lot of time had I stuck to it at the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey.
I get it. Yeah, run your own race. Yeah, don't worry too much about what's going on elsewhere. I love it, Simon. It's been a real pleasure. Thanks for chatting about Airbnb and telling us all about SuiteOp.
Thank you so much for having me, James. It was fantastic to be on the podcast today.
Great to chat to Simon Seroussi there from SuiteOp about those Airbnb policy changes and his fast-growing tech platform. If you're looking for more free education, head to houseplanet.club, the fastest-growing multimedia platform in the short-term rentals industry. We're proud to help hosts and property managers supercharge their businesses by sharing a wealth of free content. Head online to sign up for our newsletter, download our suite of ebooks, and listen to our podcast series. Until next time, happy hosting.